will be opening this special town meeting pursuant to General Law, Chapter 39, Section 14. I would first like to observe a moment of silence in memory of the moderator, Thomas Horgan Jr., who passed away on October 17, 2020. Thank you, Tom. I ask everybody to please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I now call for the nominations for the election of a temporary town moderator to preside over this meeting.
Madam Clerk?
Yes.
I would like to nominate Sam Goodwin.
Second.
Are there any other nominations? We have a nomination on the floor for Mr. Sam Goodwin. Hearing none, I will ask for a motion to close the nominations.
So moved.
Second.
I ask the chairman of the select board to cast the sole vote and declare the results.
I vote for Sam Goodwin and declare them the temporary moderator for this meeting.
Mr. Goodwin, if you will please join me, and I will swear in Mr. Goodwin to preside as moderator over this evening's meeting. Do solemnly swear that you will faithfully and impartially discharge all the duties and public authority of moderator in accordance with the bylaws of Ayer, the laws of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and the Constitution of the United States of America. Excellent.
Good evening. To start with, I'd like to review a few of the rules for this evening. The quorum for this town meeting has been reduced from 50 to 40 voters due to COVID-19 by vote of the Ayer Select Board on the duly posted open session meeting on Tuesday, October 20th, 2020. Due to COVID-19, all town meeting attendees must wear masks and face coverings and adhere to the principles of social distancing. This is for everyone's comfort. Please turn off all cell phones and electronic devices. All voting cards, the pink index cards you were given, will not be collected at the end of the town meeting and should be discarded in the trash barrel upon exiting. Please allow all presentations for each article to be completed before wishing to speak at town meeting. If you wish to address the town meeting, you must raise your hand or stand from your seat. You'll be recognized by the moderator. You must wait for a touchless microphone to reach you. We have two touchless microphones in the front row. They're boom mics, so if somebody sticks something at you, don't get nervous. You must state your name and address for the record. Your question or point must be related to the article currently before the meeting. As a reminder, we remain in a COVID-19 pandemic, and our goals this evening are to effectively conduct the town's business in a safe, timely, and orderly manner for all those in attendance. Please keep questions and remarks focused for each article as they are discussed in the meeting. Thank you for cooperation. Stage introductions. To my right, far right, Sean Copeland, the chair. Scott Good, vice chair. Janice Livingston, clerk. Robert Pombrown, Midtown manager. To my left, Susan Copeland, Town Clerk. Patrick Diamond, Chairman of the FinCom. In the second row back, the balance of the FinCom, Mark Smith, Terry Harville, Greg Ketchum, Matt Selden. And our town council, Mr. Mark Rich, from the law firm of K&P Law, is in the audience as well. The clerk will read the charge.
Town of Ayer Special Annual Fall Town Meeting Warrant. Ayer Shirley Regional High School Auditorium, 141 Washington Street, Ayer, Massachusetts, 01432, October 26, 2020, at 7 p.m. Commonwealth of Massachusetts, Middlesex County, greetings. In the name of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, you are hereby directed to notify and warn the inhabitants of the town of Ayer qualified to vote in town elections and affairs to meet at the auditorium in the Ayer Shirley Regional High School, located at 141 Washington Street, Ayer, Massachusetts, on Monday, the 26th day of October 2020, at 7 o'clock in the evening, then and there to act on the following articles. Hereof, fail not and make due return of this warrant with your doings thereof to the town clerk before the date appointed for said meeting. Given under our hands the 6th day of October, AD 2020. Sean C. Copeland, Chair. Scott A. Hood, Vice Chair. Janice L. Livingston, Clerk, Ayer Select Board. A true copy and test, Susan E. Copeland, Town Clerk, dated October 8, 2020. As directed in the foregoing warrant, I have this day posted 3 attested copies in 3 public places, one of which was the Town Hall at least 14 days before said meeting, all as herein directed. Samuel A. Goodwin Jr., Constable, dated October 8, 2020.
Article 1, to see if the town will vote to transfer $230,000 from free cash to replenish the Urban Development Action Grant, UDAG, account from the following: Worthingdale Depot Square Eminent Domain Settlement, $230,000. Or take any action thereon or in relation thereto. Sponsored by the Board of Selectmen, FinCom recommends. Simple majority vote required.
Mr. Moderator,
Sir.
I'd like to move that the town vote to transfer $230,000 from free cash to replenish the Urban Development Action Grant account for the Worthingdale Depot Square Eminent Domain Settlement as contained in Article 1 and read by the moderator.
Seconded.
We have a motion and it's seconded. Any discussion? Ms. Bedard.
Elizabeth Bedard, 28 Coolidge. I have a question. Where does this money come from to fund this? Does it come from free cash or a stabilization fund?
The source is from free cash.
It is from free cash?
Any further questions? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? The ayes carry, it's unanimous. Article 2, forward funding of the town's pension assessment. To see if the town will vote to transfer a sum of $300,000 from free cash for the purpose of forward funding the town's pension assessment from Middlesex County Retirement System, or take any action thereto or in relation thereto. Sponsored Board of Selectmen, FinCom recommends. Simple majority required.
Mr. Moderator,
Mr. Hood.
I move that the town vote to transfer the sum of $300,000 from free cash for the purpose of forward funding the town's pension assessment from Middlesex County Retirement System as contained in Article 2 and read by the moderator.
Seconded.
We have a motion, been seconded, any discussion?
Mr. Moderator,
Sir.
through you, if there's not objection, I'd ask that Mr. Kevin Johnston, the Benefits and Payroll Manager for the town, has a very brief presentation on the forward funding of the pension.
By all means.
Mr. Moderator,
Sir.
the information in this article was first considered during the budget process for fiscal 2021 and was deferred from the annual town meeting to this fall. The town manager directed us to come up with some budget savings initiatives that would help the town save funds for this year and going forward. So the presentation tonight, the next slide will show you a representation of the budget savings that we would have seen had we been able to do this when the information for the budget years that you see there was available. So an estimated savings for contributions of $300,000 as recommended this evening. At the time of the preparation of this data last spring was $1.3 million. That number actually changed just slightly lower now because we're past a couple of those fiscal years, so it's about $1.1 million. The interesting aspect of this is we're asking you to spend some money now and then seeing savings over the next 15 or so years until the pension assessment is fully funded. Next slide, please. So this is a brief summary of the additional payments and what they would provide in different scenarios. You can see them, the $200,000, $300,000, and $400,000 scenario. The $300,000 scenario that is being considered this evening would actually be something estimated to $1.1 million as we speak this evening. The reasons for this, you might ask, why now during this time? Well, the town remains strong in its financial position, and we believe this is a solid recommendation going forward to save money in future years when we don't know what the circumstances may be. The additional payments provide budget relief in future years, and our hope is to consider this each fiscal year going forward with the hope of saving more money until the pension assessment is paid in full. Thank you.
Any questions?
Yes, Mr. Moderator, how much is in this fund right now, this present time?
Mr. Johnson?
I'm sorry, I don't understand your question.
How much money, okay, let me ask you a different question. How much money do we project on spending every year?
The pension assessment for the current fiscal year is $1.7 million. The illustration that was shown a couple of minutes ago shows an estimated savings of roughly $40,000 to $50,000 a year going forward, diminishing as time goes on as the pension assessment gets paid down.
Some of this is forecasting, right?
It's all actuarial-based forecasting, that's right.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Lori Nearing on Highland Avenue here. My question is, I was wondering if this has a direct impact on our taxes or where the money, the $300,000 per year is coming from? And like for the average homeowner, can you tell us how much the impact is?
So for this year and tonight's decision, the funding is recommended from free cash. So that actually has no impact on your taxes. It won't increase your taxes at all. And in future years, if we consider the same kinds of initiatives, a recommendation will be made at town meeting that would tell you that information.
Any further questions? Article's been moved and seconded. No further discussions. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Article passed. Unanimous. Article 3, Stabilization Fund. To see if the town will vote to transfer $949,139 from free cash or such sum or sums of money with $9,139 to be credited to the stabilization fund under the provision of Chapter 40, Section 5B of the general laws, and $940,000 to be credited to the capital stabilization fund per the town's finance policies, or take any action thereto or relation therein. Sponsored by the Board of Selectmen, FinCom recommends simple majority vote required.
Mr. Moderator,
Ms. Livingston.
I move that the town vote to transfer $949,139 from free cash with $9,139 to be credited to the stabilization fund under the provisions of Chapter 40, Section 5B of the general laws, and $940,000 to be credited to the capital stabilization fund per the town's financial policies as contained in the article and read by the moderator.
Second.
Article's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Sir.
That's it here. Yeah, there you go.
Stay right there.
What is the stabilization fund and what is it used for? It doesn't really explain it all in the article.
Your name and address, sir?
Chris Valentine, 141 Snake Hill Road.
Moderator. The stabilization fund is the town's savings account. It is generally allocated between regular stabilization and capital stabilization. The differentiation between that is, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Robert, the number of votes that's required to pass usage at a town meeting. So this is coming from free cash, which is we've taken in more revenue than we've spent in a fiscal year. That becomes free cash, so we're going to put this aside for future savings or future expenditures.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? None. Article passed. Unanimous. Article 4, acquisition of West Main Street property for a new senior center. To see if the town will vote to authorize the select board to acquire by gift, purchase, or eminent domain two adjacent properties and any improvements thereon located at 211 West Main Street, Ayer tax map 32, lot 13, being those premises described in the deed recorded with Middlesex South District Registry of Deeds, book 68381, page 394, excuse me, and 2, 0 West Main Street, Ayer, tax map 32 to lot 11, being those premises described in the deed recorded in Middlesex South District Registry of Deeds in book 37871, page 11, for general municipal purposes, including but not limited to a senior center, and to accept a deed or deeds for said property, and as funding for such acquisition and costs related thereto, to raise and appropriate or transfer from available funds to borrow or any combination thereof the sum of $750,000 or other sums or sums of money, and further to authorize the select board to enter into all agreements and execute on behalf of the town any and all instruments as may be necessary or convenient to effect the purpose of this article in the best interest of the town, or take any action thereon or in relation thereto. Sponsored Select Board, FinCom, to report. 2/3 vote will be required.
Mr. Moderator,
Sir.
I move that the town vote to authorize the select board to acquire by purchase two adjacent properties and any improvements thereon located at 211 West Main Street for general municipal purposes of a senior center, and to authorize the treasurer, with the approval of the select board, to borrow the sum of up to $750,000 for such acquisition and cost related thereto, and to further authorize the select board to enter into all agreement and execute on behalf of the town any and all instruments as may be necessary or convenient to effectuate the purpose of this article in the best interest of the town as contained in Article 4 and read by the moderator.
Seconded.
We have a motion and a second, and I believe a presentation.
Mr. Moderator,
Sir,
I do have a presentation on Article 4.
please.
Good evening. Good evening. I'm Robert Conrad, the Ayer Town Manager, and wanted to provide a brief overview of what we're looking for with Article 4, which is the acquisition of 211 West Main Street. And to give you some reference, it's on the map, that parcel with the red hash marks. It is directly across the street from the Devon's Plaza on West Main Street. There was an old use, the last use of it was a video store. There's a building. So there's two parcels. There's the parcel with the building and then that large area as well. It's a 4.5 acre site. So I just wanted to give you reference as to where we're talking about. Okay, next. And what we're talking about is a larger project, which is hopefully end up being the future site of a new senior center. And as we move forward, we want to get away from the term of senior center and more towards an active living center. And what you see here is, from the consultant, is just a conceptual drawing of a potential center at that location right on West Main Street with the necessary parking and space. And we'll come back to that in just a moment. Next. So why a new senior center? Well, first, the current facility located at 18 Pond Street is inadequate for the spatial needs of the senior center. It's only about 2,000 square feet of usable space. There are about 15 to 18 parking spaces, not a lot of parking. There are ADA accessible issues with the facility, and there's no room for expansion, as we'll talk about in a moment. The consultant looked at 18 Pond Street in great detail, and it is just not adequate for the future of the center here at Ayer. Additionally, the 2017 master plan identified a new senior center as a high priority. Specifically, identify a location that could accommodate the spatial needs for the senior center to expand the capacity for services and programs. And as such, this body, town meeting, approved funding in the amount of $30,000 for a senior center feasibility study, which was Article 15 of the May 14th, 2018 town meeting. And that feasibility study was challenged with two things. One, to look at the conceptual needs of the future, but also a huge challenge we have, finding a site to support that. Next. The current senior center facility challenges, and this is just a small list if you looked at the feasibility study. In addition to the lack of adequate space of only 2,000 square feet and parking restrictions, the limited space and size prohibits a diverse range of spaces needed for physical activities, arts and crafts, games, socializing, and as the director and I have found since COVID-19, applying social distancing to 2,000 square feet is why we haven't been able to get also that space open. That was an unforeseen challenge that became a reality a few months ago. Additionally, there's a lack of professional office and staff space, lack of adequate private areas for the purposes of discussing confidential issues such as finance, health, nutrition. There's no space for outdoor activities. Yes, there's Peroni Park there, but there's no space, accessible space at 18 Pond Street to do a lot of outdoor activities. The entry is not welcoming, is not visible or accessible. That's sort of a little snapshot of it there. The current kitchen, which is huge to the senior center, is not adequate to meet the growing needs of the senior center's extensive meal program. We have learned recently, as we're updating the town's ADA plan, there are various ADA violations identified in this facility that need to be corrected, including the bathrooms. The restrooms don't meet the ADA requirements, and there's really insufficient parking for the public, the visitors, and the staff. And if you were to try to do any group event there, that is a huge challenge. So that's just a snapshot of some of the challenges we face. Next. So the Senior Center Feasibility Study procured the professional firm of Abacus Architects and Planners to work with the study committee, which consists of myself, the Assistant Town Manager, our Director of the Council on Aging, Karen Swanfeld, Mark Wetzel, the DPW Superintendent, the Town Engineer, and Alan Manoyan, the Director of Community Economic Development. We also had a series of meetings with the board members of the Council on Aging. I know many of them are here tonight. Next. So the challenge we have in Ayer, and this was also identified in the 2017 master plan, is finding a site to build any type of project. The town does not have large tracts of municipally owned land, nor does it have an abundance or inventory of municipal facilities. Additionally, we're only 9.5 square miles, and in many cases, we're approaching sort of a build-out. And in the master plan, we identified that many of the remaining sites fall into the category of what's called a 21E environmental site, which we'll talk about in a moment. But the committee in the study, we held a community meeting here on September 30th of 2019, was very well attended by a lot of seniors and members from the community to talk about what you wanted in a center. This is to get sort of the conceptual basic design. And after that, we looked at a lot of sites. In fact, the study in detail over a 16-month period looked at 7 possible sites. One was 18 Pond Street, which is the existing facility, 99 Fitchburg Road, which some know is the David E. Ross building, 106 Park Street, which is the area of land across from Tiny's, 0 Brook Street, which is a building near the DPW complex, 6 Groton Street, which is the former Horn building, which is directly across from the parking facility, 115 Washington Street, which is the old fire station, and then 211 West Main Street. And in the report that we've put out, in great detail went through the analysis of all of the criteria of these sites. And so in the interest of time through that whole process, the 211 West Main Street was identified as an optimal site potentially for this. Next. So 211 West Main Street, what makes that optimal? It's a 4.5 acre site. It's large enough to support the approximately 12,000 square foot active living center that was based on all of the needs that seniors in the community wanted. It's looking at about a 12,000 square foot building, including the 75 accessible parking spaces. The rear of the site provides for the opportunity for walking trails and outdoor space and outdoor activities. The location on West Main, accessibility and walkability of the site, the West Main Street form-based code, which town meeting recently passed. This could be a potential first investment in West Main Street corridor, being a catalyst for further development. It is an opportunity to potentially clean up and utilize a prominent piece of land in town, which is also consistent with the master plan goal of remediating 21E sites in town. And lastly, it's an opportunity to construct a 21st century center for active living. Next. So there are 2 issues tonight we're asking on the potential acquisition of the land, cost and the environmental issue. So I'll start with the cost of 211 West Main Street.
As mentioned, it's a 4.5 acre private property. Its appraised value is $376,900 based on the town assessor's appraised value. The price is negotiated between the select board and the seller. The negotiated price, and I want to maybe put negotiated in quotes, negotiated price is $670,000, but as I note, that's the maximum amount. So it wouldn't be higher than that. And why I point that out is there are two key factors still in play with this acquisition that are required. The first is the town needs to do a fair market appraisal, an independent appraisal of the property, and that appraisal can be used in negotiating against the $670,000. The second piece is a 21E environmental assessment, in which there are three step phases to this. A phase one, which you do initially. The phase one could potentially lead to a phase two, and then maybe to a phase three. But the environmental assessment, the town has an independent licensed site professional that looks at the environmental conditions of the property. And we're going to talk about that in just a moment, but these two factors can affect that price in a downward direction, which is positive for the town. I need to stress this point. We've stressed it with the select board. The select board has stressed it as we've talked about this, that the final acquisition must be in the town's best interest in terms of cost and environmental conditions. So in terms of the acquisition, if it is cost prohibitive, specifically on the environmental end, or it is not in the town's best interest in overall cost or so forth, we won't move forward. Tonight, if you will, is sort of the first phase in moving towards this. Next. The environmental conditions. And many of you I know are familiar and concerned about this and have contacted my office. The site does have a history of environmental contamination. Specifically, the building that was there was, at one point, was a former dry cleaners. And the dry cleaning chemicals went into the ground. What we do know is that the previous owner has conducted about $1 million in soil remediation of the site. The previous owner also conducted environmental monitoring of the site, specifically the building and the air quality in the building, up until about 2014, and then that stopped. The remaining environmental concerns largely had to do with the building and the interior air quality. If we get to this point, the town's project to demolish the existing building and permit potential remediation under the building. We're not going to use the existing building, obviously, for the senior center. The town's 21E environmental assessment would provide the current detailed information on the conditions of the site, remediation efforts required, and the scope and estimated costs for cleanup. However, because this is a privately owned property, you can't just do the 21E without moving in the direction of a purchase and sale agreement. And again, we would not proceed if the environmental conditions are not in the best interest of the town or the costs are prohibitive. Next. So the article before you, Article 4, does two things, or asks you to consider two things. The first one is it authorizes the town to proceed with the acquisition of 211 West Main Street. So in order for the town to move forward with acquiring any property, it requires an affirmative vote of town meeting. So that's the first step. Subject to the following, and these are safeguards for the town. A satisfactory 21E environmental assessment is required, and an independent land appraisal is also required. And the second thing the article does is it authorizes the town to borrow up to $750,000 for this acquisition. Now, as I mentioned, the definitive price is no higher than $670,000, and we still have a lot of work to do with the environmental assessment and the appraisal to bring that down. The additional 80,000, because the article says 750,000, is in the event there are unforeseen contingencies with the acquisition of the land. As you move this process, there can be some unforeseen within reason. Rather than come back to town meeting for the funding, it's a contingency of 80,000. Doesn't mean that we would necessarily borrow it or borrow all of it. And as always, the town will only borrow the amount needed and when required. So what I mean by that is the appraisal, the funding for the appraisal is already in the town budget. We have money for appraisal. And same with the 21E. If at that point it's not a deal to move forward, it's cost prohibitive, it's environmentally prohibitive and so forth, then we move to the next, we go to Plan B, whatever Plan B is, and this isn't borrowed. Next. So, in conclusion, if Article 4 passes, the town meeting, we can proceed with doing the environmental assessment, we can proceed with doing the appraisal, and moving towards potentially acquiring the site. The safeguards are the environmental assessment, is the land appraisal, and the purchase and sale agreement has these as required required binding items in it. This is only the land for the project. I want to stress that too. The project is the next phase. That phase will have to go through the capital planning process. It will go through the budget process. It will have to be approved by town meeting, and it will have to go to the voters as a ballot. That's for the actual building. But it's sort of like the cart before the horse in the sense that we need to have a site to have a project to move forward. Next. And as I just stressed, the town needs to secure the location and the property first. If this turns out that it can't be, then we'll move on. But we believe that it is an opportunity and a significant investment for the town, not only for seniors, but for the whole town, and in the interests of further development of that corridor. It is privately owned property. There are other individuals looking at that property. The owner is not required to wait for the town. It could sell theoretically tomorrow. What I'm saying is that that's part of the timing as to why we're before you tonight. So it's two parts. Part one, if tonight's affirmative vote would allow us to proceed with the environmental assessment, the appraisal, and take the first step towards acquiring the site. If successful, then the second phase, which is sort of coming attraction, would be to design and fund the new senior center, which will require further town meeting votes and a ballot question on the financing. And then, as I mentioned, sort of the next steps. If Article 4 passes, finalize the purchase and sale agreement, conduct the fair market appraisal, the 21E environmental assessment. If that all is in the best interest of the town, then move forward towards the acquisition itself. Start the budgetary and capital planning process, which is a public process for the actual facility, which will include public input on the facility, and then future town meetings for approval. So I thank you for your time and for the opportunity to sort of give you an overview of this potential opportunity for the town. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Before we have any discussions, I would like to have a report from Mr. Pat Diamond, Chairman of the FinCom.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. On the 23rd of September, Robert presented to the Finance Committee in an official meeting the prospects of acquiring this property. And I'm not going to go into the discussion since it's been very thoroughly. The Finance Committee approved this, so we're good to go.
Thank you. That covers the presentations. Floor has been motion made and seconded. Any discussion?
Mr. Moderator, well, we'll start up first. Mark, I think Lori was up before me, but I actually have an amendment to the article that I'd like to make, and then I'll let Lori go and I'll ask my questions later. My amendment would be...
Stop.
What's that?
Would the speaker please identify himself and where he lives?
Oh, David Eartha, Coolidge Road. I'd like to strike the words or eminent domain. I think we've had issues in the past with eminent domain, and I'd like to strike that out of this article.
Not in the motion. Point of order. Not in the motion. Wasn't in the motion.
Mr. Moderator.
Sir.
Mr. Moderator, through you, the motion made by Selectman Copeland that was seconded moves to acquire it by purchase only. It does, though the article lists all the potential options, the intent is only through purchase, not eminent domain.
Well, that's why the article is written, so I want to make sure that it's clear that we're not taking this by eminent domain.
It's not.
It's not.
That is what's written up on the form. So, I just want to make sure. I'll wait, the comments, Lori was up first. No, because it's not in the, they didn't pass it that way. They took it out when they presented it.
Lori Nearing, thank you. I have several comments I would appreciate a little bit of time to make, and I want to frame this by saying that I'm strongly in favor of redeveloping a site like this on the west end of town for all the reasons you described. It could be a lovely site. It would be nice to redevelop that section of town, and there's probably brownfield money available. I believe that a senior citizen does need to be built, and if we end up with a property that's that large, it would be really nice to see it include a youth center kind of affiliated with a senior center. I think that could be a wonderful application for the town. I would like very much for the town members here to be aware of a little more detail about this site and the contamination issues. And I'm speaking on behalf of myself, but also with my knowledge working through PACE, people that are concerned about the environment, because we worked quite a bit on the site when it was a real serious issue. So I'm going to spend just a few minutes giving you the historical background. I'll just try to take like 3 minutes, so please bear with me. I went through 2 file boxes full of data over the last few days, and I condensed it down to a couple of pages. First of all, you may remember that, those of you who have been here a long time, it used to be Bunny's Restaurant back in the day, this property. If we could actually go to the picture of the property, I would appreciate that. You can go back to the slide for the picture of the property. I'll be referring to that. Around 1966, it became the first dry cleaning business, and it was sold 3 or 4 times to different dry cleaners. It stopped being a dry cleaning business around 1994 when Devon's closed and the business went bankrupt. During that time, it was known that there was possible contamination. People smelled, there was lots of smell things, there were lots of rumors of contamination. And it wasn't until May of 2002 that the Shell gas station next door was being sold. John Reagan owned the gas station. He wanted to do the right thing. The Shell Oil Company had the money to do the environmental assessment. And when he did the environmental assessment, he found dry cleaning solvent, which is also known as PCE, perchloroethylene, or PERC, in the soil on his property, and they realized that it had come from the property next door where the former dry cleaning business was. At that time, the store had been purchased by a private individual in 1998. It's our understanding that that did not go through a bank for the purchase. It was a cash deal, which we believe means that there was no site assessment required. It's the bank that requires these site assessments to be done. But there were lots of rumors going around town that there's a lot of contamination there. And we believe that the hope was that that site would become the future railroad station where the MBTA could have its gathering place for a new station. And it was that was the case, the whole thing would have been paved over and maybe the contamination would not have been a problem. That's not the way things turned out. The private owner rented the facility to a video store that was there for a couple of years. They were not informed that there was possible contamination. However, there were very strong and sweet smells in the building. The occupants that rented that space did become very sick. They were breathing in what turned out to be extremely high levels of indoor air vapor that was coming up through the basement and the soil. The levels that were found eventually in around 2003 in the groundwater right outside the back door, 17,500 micrograms per liter of PCE. That means nothing until you realize that the maximum contaminant level is 5. 17,500, the level you're going to be exposed to legally is 5. In the soil nearby, they found 2,400,000 micrograms per meter squared of PCE in the soil. They realized that a lot of this was coming up through the basement. The video store owner who occupied the space was in the building most often. In the office area, happened to have the indoor air quality was the highest levels they found altogether. So they eventually knew there were serious problems there. Some environmental site assessments were done. A miscalculation was turned into the Mass DEP of how much contamination was done, and so the people who owned the video store stayed in that building for about 2 years. Until March 9th, 2004, Nick Child, the head of DEP, called the owners of the video store and told them that they were in an imminent health hazard situation, that they were endangering their lives being in that building. And he called at 2 p.m. and they were out of there by 3 p.m., locked the doors, even turn the lights off. That was the end of their business. The end of their livelihood, actually. And they were dealing with health issues. So, speeding forward, the owner of this property did hire another environmental consultant, a different one that didn't make miscalculations. We worked closely with those who faced. They did further analysis and found exactly where the contamination and plume was located. They helped install a SVE, a soil, what do we call it? SVE, soil vapor, SVE, soil vapor extraction system. So that treated what was inside the building by essentially cleaning the air. They also did some sub-slab contamination. They put in a sub-slab depressurization system, which is what we do when we have radon in our basement. That helped get rid of the problem, reduce the problem. And they also removed a large amount of the soil where they discovered was contaminated, the worst right outside the back door where it looked like dumping had been going on, illegal dumping had been going on. So that all helped. Further studies going more towards 2012-ish. Studies were done on a regular basis. They continue to find some PCE in the ground and the soil. They continue to find some in the air. They determined that as long as the various systems were running properly, that the indoor air quality passed. The last report we were able to find was from 2014. I did review that report just this afternoon. It appears to me to be having a fair amount of data gaps in the report. For example, they were not able to get inside the building to do indoor air quality studies. The doors are locked, so there's no data for the most current study. I will say that in 2012, the DEP did an audit, and they found that as long as the SVE systems were on, the building passed its analysis. So what we can assume is that when they turned the SVE system off and did the measurements, the PCE percolated up into the building. So it is still there. It's under the building, it's next to the building. We also know the history of the former owner of this property, or he's the current owner of the property, had a lot of junk and debris and sheds way in the back property. We know that when they pulled up the soil for contamination to do the excavation, They built a cement slab in another location right on that same property. They put the contaminated soil on top of that slab. They built a temporary hut around it, and they let it ventilate, which means it's just off-gassing naturally. It's not really pulling it out and taking it off property other than the off-gassing that occurred. We know also that when we have PCE on the property, it's a chlorinated solvent, has 4 chlorine atoms on it. This, when it breaks down, goes from 4 chlorines to 3 to 2 to 1, and then it breaks down into something that's not as dangerous. The final daughter product that it breaks down into is vinyl chloride. Vinyl chloride is actually more toxic than tetrachloride is. And so PCE goes to TCE, goes to DiCE, it finally goes to vinyl chloride, which is a known carcinogen. It's more toxic than the PCE originally was. So I say all of this because it sounds to me like the town is being asked to foot the bill. So we can look at the picture up there. You can imagine where the video store is. The contamination is in, as I look at it from my perspective, the back right-hand side of the building is where the worst contamination was. And these temporary buildings were also on this property. So can we clean it up? Yes, we can clean it up. Should we be paying for it is my question. And I think there are brownfield monies out there. I'm sure we have the staff who can write wonderful grants. We can probably get financial support. This site is also within the Zone 2 drinking water supply for the McPherson well. Maybe Mass Development would be interested in helping us clean this site up. It would be great to clean it up. My question to you folks is, are we putting the cart before the horse, and should we be paying for this? Thank you.
Mr. Moderator, Jim Fay, 1 Victor Drive. Everything Laurie just said. My main concern really, although I wasn't able to, I was traveling, I wasn't able to attend the public meetings on this. I also agree that the need is there, the acquisition of a site is necessary, and the future of our seniors would look brighter together. The thing in the brief research I've done, again, is why do we do the 21E? When we look back at Jan Schlickman and what he did for the owners of the video store, and Jan Schlickman being the lawyer for EPA that is moving civil action, he declared, look, this is a terrible site, close the door, go away, don't come back. And I don't see where we should be paying the 21E cost to remediate. The other issue I find in some brief research is that the site at one point sold for $1. So if the site sold for $1 and nothing was ever done, that triggers something in me. Why would we pay anything for this if it's only worth $1? That aside, a little further research on that. But the big thing is that right adjacent to the left, as you look at that picture, Laurie pointed out, again, where the site is proposed is one thing, it's 21E. But when you look at that area on the left, as it moves toward Fort Devens, and what used to be the airfield road, that was at one time in the 50s a dump site. I don't know how many people know that or remember it, but in my course of planning boarding under the BRAC and the time of Devens and so forth, and I believe I was either selected or chairman of the planning board at the time the 21E issue came up, really 2000s. So the whole thing looks to me like, yes, the need for a new senior center is there. I agree with the concept for it, but I don't agree with the site based on those issues. I don't think you're ever going to clean up based on the fact that back in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, that was a dump site as it moved toward the airfield road. So that's why I would not vote in favor of this. Thank you.
Mr. Bedard.
Thank you, David Eartha, Coolidge Road. And I also agree. we need a senior center, hopefully a senior center that would incorporate some sort of a public youth center, maybe an art space and all that. And I agree totally with that, just not here at this site. One comment I'm going to make now on this article, and it also applies to Article 9, is that this should, the discussion we're having today on the land, we had a discussion about the senior center, it's a great idea, but there should have been an open forum discussion by the selectmen, town manager, whatever, about these issues. This shouldn't be happening at town meeting. It's just the wrong forum for it. Also, the railroad actually did request a 21E assessment of this property after 2014. I don't know if the town has even, went out and looked, just because that's available on, up on the web. I have a little bit of an issue maybe, the RTN, which is what the DEP number is, the number is open. DEP required 6 months, every 6 months a report, those reports stopped in 2014. There's not a reason for that, except that DEP has not been enforcing the reporting. So, we talked about this. This is really 2 parcels. It's 211 and then the other parcel as well. And we also have to make sure that on the other parcel, which is very tight to the 211, that parcel also may have some contamination. We're going to be doing not just, I assume, a 21E on one parcel, but possibly on both parcels, at least to that corner. And if not, we should be, because as we've seen with the plumes coming out of Devon's, it does expand, it does move. And it's a less, I guess, maybe, we changed the zoning for this area to hopefully develop West Main Street into like a West Main Street village. And it's a great idea, and we got a lot of support. So we're hoping that this will turn out to be actually a very good tax incentive to the town. Money coming in, large businesses, different things. We are taking, at this point then, taking 4.5 acres of prime development out of the tax roll, because the town is not going to pay itself the taxes. And I don't know, did not have a chance to look, but what the town will be losing from taxes coming in from the property. And this is prime property, if we can get, as we get forward. And that's a little bit concerning too, because, the taxes are going up every year, and this would actually be a very good area to help us maintain a reasonable amount. And the last, I guess, my comment is, and I understand what Robert's coming from, but it's really not the town's responsibility to look for all the 21E sites in town and clean them up by buying them. Yes, we should encourage the cleaning up, we should try it, but the town shouldn't buy all these 21E sites, clean them up, for anything, and take them off the tax rolls for this reason, just to clean them up. There are, as we make the Ayer is becoming a very popular place, people will come here, business will come here. If we can keep West Main Street as a strong business area, businesses will come. Just got to give them an opportunity. We just changed the zoning, I believe, last year. Thank you very much.
Mr. Moderator?
Connie Sullivan from 79 East Main Street. I'm certainly concerned about the contamination issues that Lori Nearing and David Durf have raised, particularly with respect to this site. But I also question why a town of approximately 7,500 people needs its own senior center. Why aren't we looking to do something jointly with some of the other towns in the area? The town of Groton, for instance, just built a beautiful center. Has anybody approached Groton about sharing the facilities with the seniors from Ayer? Or perhaps approaching the town of Charlotte? We have a joint school system with them. Why not look into a joint venture with another town rather than do it our own? My other issue is, you have the current senior center located next to senior housing. You move a senior center location to a location such as West Main Street. Now you've got a whole host of transportation issues. You've got seniors in the senior housing project that are in wheelchairs, they need transportation. And has anybody thought about the cost of trying to transport now 50, 60, 70 seniors that reside in the current senior facility to a different location to take advantage of the senior center. Lastly, I'm a little bit concerned that we don't see a proposal that combines land acquisition with proposed construction. My concern is we get $1 million or $2 million into the acquisition of the property. Perhaps we find out that the contamination is too strong and we don't go further. So we've got $1 million or $2 million that was ill spent. Or we get to the point where we got $1 million or $2 million into it, it's a viable piece of property. Now what are we going to be spending for a structure? Does this become a $5 million project overall, a $7 million project? And we haven't even finished doing the athletic facilities at the school. And now we want to jump into another unknown capital project. I just think it's a poorly thought out planned project at this time for our town. I think there's better ways to accomplish what we need to do for our seniors. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Jeff Mays, 72 Pleasant. I guess this would be directed to Robert. What is considered satisfactory as far as the 21E? Because the board's definition of satisfactory compared to mine or anyone else's in this room could be drastically different. So who or what defines satisfactory moving forward?
Mr. Moderator, through you to Mr. May's question. The two categories. Obviously, there's the economic, financial end of it. If this was going to turn into millions of dollars or a black hole in, as far as the remediation and so forth, it was cost prohibitive. That would not be in the town's best interest. More importantly, as mentioned by Lori and others on the environmental piece, the town takes public safety and public health is the most important thing we do. If the professionals, based on the most recent information, most current 21E information, that the site couldn't be safely remediated. In other words, if the site poses a potential health hazard moving forward, that's a red light. It's not in the best interest. The last thing the town would ever do would be moving forward with a project that would pose health issues for folks.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm Julie Farnsworth, Redland Court, and I'm also a long-time member of People of Air concerned about the environment. Lauren and I worked together in the public input activities that are ongoing during the remediation. And one very important point that I think needs to be clear is that the owner of the property, his goal was to get permission to have it able to be leased to the next commercial tenant. That's what he wanted to do. And part of the problem in cleaning it up is that the building was sitting on top of a major part of the contamination. Take that building down, and the problem of clearing it out gets presumably much easier, and phase 2 21E investigation can, I believe, determine that. So I think that we probably want to go ahead with that, find out specifically what it will take to completely remove all the contamination. So, also, just a question, I'm confused about where 0 West Main is exactly. Can you clarify that for me? It's the back?
Yeah.
Okay.
She doesn't know where 0 West Main.
It's the rear of the Mr. Moderator, through you to Ms. Cornwood's question, it's the larger rear parcel.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and just one other thing, which is that it's believed that there's a groundwater contamination plume migrating off-site, as some people mentioned. could be going in the direction of the person municipal water supply bill, which is one of the other wells. And there's a Sentinel monitoring well there, which somewhere around 2010 was getting sporadic hits. And people said, well, okay, it was there, but now it's gone. And it's likely that the plume is there, but the location of the well was at the edge of the plume. So that as the plume wavers a little bit in different groundwater conditions, the hits can come and go in that monitoring well. So I think that if we can manage to just get rid of the building, finish cleaning up the contaminated soil, and remove the source of where that groundwater fluid is coming from, so that would be a big win. So, that's it.
Mr. Moderator, Ed Kelly, 20 Oak Ridge Drive. I'd like to further expand on what Connie said too a little bit. My main question about this is timing. Where are we as a town right now? Does everyone have a job? Are all the taxes being paid? All the mortgages, all the rents? You know, Massachusetts has the highest unemployment in the United States. Revenue is down, lottery is down. What about state aid? Is that down? Now, if we pass this article, what have we got? We got a piece of land, we got a building that's got to be raised. And no point, like Connie says, is the overall cost of this been set. Are we talking 4 million, 5 million, 6 million, 2 million, 1 million? What are we talking about here? How many millions of dollars are we talking for 7,000 or 8,000 people? I just think we really should consider the state of the economy right now. We don't know where we're going. Nobody knows what's going to happen next week, next year. And I really think, too, the very next article, we're on $600,000, $610,000 to help our water. Now, to me, water is important. I think we've got to do that. So does that mean higher water rates? We've got to be careful. I think where the economy is right now, we should really be careful of what we do. Thank you.
Ruth Maxon Schultz, Taft Street. I'm just confused about the wording. You said the wording that we have in our paperwork here is not the wording that was read concerning what we're voting on. Could you please reiterate what are the exact words that we're voting on here, that first sentence?
Mr. Moderator, through you to Ms. Maxon Schultz, the article that's printed, Article 4 in the warrant, gives several authorizations by gift, purchase, or eminent domain. Those are all of the options, if you will. However, the key, the motion that was made by the select board and seconded, that's on the floor, the legally binding motion, is to authorize the select board to acquire by purchase. So if Article 4 passes, it would be an acquisition through purchase, not eminent domain or gift. That was the clarification.
Thank you. Pam Lyman, 9 Precinct 1 Road. Of the 7 properties that you talked about earlier, why is this one the only one we're looking at or talking about?
Moderator.
Cindy, can you put up the site slide?
Mr. Moderator, through you, the resident's question was out of the other sites, why is this one being considered, or why is this one optimal? And that's a very good question. And in the interest of time, I just want to reiterate again that this $30,000 was authorized to do a whole feasibility study with a professional firm
that spent about 16 months looking at sites in this town. We wish that there was an easy, clean site that was either owned municipally or a municipal building that we could do this on. It was narrowed down to 7 sites, the majority of which are all private property. 18 Pond Street, of course, the existing facility was looked at, and I touched upon the issues there. 99 Fitchburg Road, which is on the Shirley border, some know it as the David E. Ross building. The issues there, one is it was on septic. There was concern about the septic. The other thing is when we discussed with the seniors and the Council on Aging Board, the concern was the distance from outside of town. Also, since this study, that property is obviously no longer available, has changed hands. 106 Park Street is a land sort of across from Tiny's, if you will. The issues with that site is it's encroached by wetlands in the back and the floodplain, so the site is actually much smaller than it would be to accommodate the approximately 12,000 square foot building and the parking. So the wetlands encroachment, also it's on that major Fitchburg Road with the curb cuts, again, looking in traffic coming in and out. That site was ruled out. 0 Brook Street, which is a building down by the DPW complex. Again, it had to do with the size of the parcel in accommodating the parking. And there's a building there that would have to come down for the purposes of this project. 6 Groton Street, I know it says road, 6 Groton Street, the former Horn building across from the parking facility. The problem was the footprint size of the building as far as the parking and so forth and access. And also in many of these cases, in any of these instances, because we're a municipality looking to acquire the land, we would do a phase 1, 21E on any of them. 115 Washington Street is the old fire station, which the challenge there was the size, and there's no parking. Granted, it's right in the downtown. Of course, that is a privately owned property that at this time is not for sale, is pending to be renovated into housing. And then the 211 West Main Street presented itself as an option to further look into to construct the center. That's like the town meeting snapshot of the analysis that went into that.
And thank you for that information. Can you touch a little bit more on that 0 Brook Street, why that wasn't considered or why it wouldn't be an option?
So 0 Brook Street, which is a building as you're coming into the DPW complex. The issues with that was the size of the actual footprint. So even taking down the building, the footprint to build it wasn't quite large enough to also accommodate the parking as well. So it was really parking and size was the main issue.
Thank you.
Yep.
Good evening, I'm Beth Sidmeyer from Nashua Street, and I think that, a lot has been discussed about the contamination issue, but I'm kind of wondering about the timing for the proposal. The study was completed in September of 2019. Now we are being asked to support this funding whenever we don't have an appraisal, and I think the appraisal is really critical for this. I think the price seems quite high. And given all the contamination, I just think it's really not a very practical request. So I'm wondering when the purchase and sale agreement was signed, would there have been time to conduct an appraisal before town meeting? I think that, it's a really, really big piece. I have concerns about more funding being allocated towards the project than is needed for the acquisition, because we talked a lot about how much the cost of the cleanup could really escalate, and I just want to make sure that full environmental evaluation would be done before acquisition. And if the purchase and sale agreement only refers to the the requirement of a phase one to be conducted, I find that incredibly insufficient for a site of this nature, given we know there's significant contamination there. A phase two assessment would be needed in order to actually really get into the site and study what the conditions are now. Again, we don't even have reports to DEP since something like 2014. So there's a real void of data for this site, even though we know there's significant contaminant concerns. So I think that you need to have a phase two evaluation done, and you need to have a remediation plan prepared by an LSP to fully understand what the town would be getting into. So I think it's incredibly premature to ask the town to fund acquisition and cleanup costs, which are all very speculative at this time. This is a borrowing question, so I'm also wondering, would we have to go to an election, a ballot question in order to fund this? I hadn't heard that mentioned, so I think I'll leave my comments there, but we'd like sort of a response about timing and the appraisal at least, and the ballot question.
So I just want to let everyone know that in order for the board to enter into a purchase and sale agreement, you all have to agree. We cannot enter into the purchase and sale agreement until you've said, yeah, we're going to authorize you to have this ceiling of money, which we've broken down to. Currently, the price would not be higher than $670,000. We've asked for up to $750,000 for incidentals. But we cannot do an appraisal unless we've entered into this agreement. We cannot do a 21E unless you've given us approval. So basically, we're asking you permission to go into this, to look at this, to go ahead and have the appraisal, to go ahead and have the 21E. And then if it doesn't work out, then yes, the money would have been spent on the appraisal, the money would have been spent on the 21E, which, as Robert said, is currently in the budget. But if it doesn't work out, then it's all stopped. So that's what we're asking. So that's why we don't have the actual appraisal info, why we don't have the actual 21E info, because we can't unless you give us permission to go forward. And the other thing is, the problem is with, I'm trying to eat this thing. The other problem is that we cannot go onto obviously private property and just go do this. And then the problem is when opportunities arise on having property to possibly purchased on behalf of the town, it's usually a very time constraint, and that's why it went right to town meeting, and then due to COVID and everything and trying to get everything arranged. So that's why this has come to town meeting in the way it has. But we cannot do anything or get any other further info unless you agree that you think that it would be worthwhile to find out the information in case it turns out positive, and then that ends up being a beautiful location for the senior center. At the same token, the information could come back and we could all be going, whoa, that's even worse than we thought. But we can't do anything until you've given us the yay or nay.
Go ahead.
Just to respectfully disagree with that comment. So I've actually been involved with appraisals that have been conducted for potential acquisitions by the town of Ayer, which happened before town meeting vote. We actually have conducted appraisals for potential acquisitions that never made it to town meeting. Now, if you need the funding, to conduct the appraisal, that's one thing, but you certainly can conduct the appraisal prior to coming to town meeting, and I would recommend that that is done.
Yes, Paul Seeley, Central Ave. I have a couple of issues with this. Number one, with any 21E, there could be potential issues that aren't seen during that study, and then the town would become responsible for that. We've seen that in past projects, major ones in here. And the other thing is,
You don't know future impact of the chemicals in the ground, and what's going to take place liability-wise in the future to the town of Ayer if we end up having seniors or employees there getting sick. Who's going to foot the bill for that? So I don't think anybody here can answer that question. As we heard, the chemicals change and can become more toxic. There was a gas station there that leaked. There's a dump site there. So, in my opinion, I don't think we should put our seniors on a contaminated site. I certainly, if my parents were alive, I certainly wouldn't want them going there every day. So that's my opinion. Thank you.
Point of order, Mr. Moderator. Sir, I would like to move the table Article 4, because I think we've got pretty much a plan for how town meeting feels, and we do have other articles to talk about. Second. All those in favor of tabling the article, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? No. All right.
Mr. Moderator, just to be reminded, the motion to table question is a 2/3 vote.
Yes, sir. I need 2 counters. Rich?
Is the motion on the floor to table until when? The meeting or before? Future meeting.
Two-thirds majority required. All those in favor of tabling this article to a future meeting, stand and hold your cards up.
That's a majority.
Good job. Okay, you can proceed. All those opposed, tabling this to another meeting, stand and hold your card.
It was broken before you got here. No, I'm not. That's what you tell people. No, he's not.
The count was 69 to table, 32 not to. The article is tabled to a future meeting. Sir.
Today, when Mr. Brown, did you find those on what the effect of tabling?
He wants us to explain what the effects of tabling are.
Do you need me?
Mr. Moderator, through you, the effective tabling is that the matter will not be considered at this meeting, and it may come back at a future meeting depending upon
Determination by the board of selectmen to put it on a warrant for a future meeting.
There's no time limit. All right. Article 5. Borrow authorization for additional funding for the Spectacle Pond Water Treatment Plant improvement as for removal of PFAS. I'm not saying that. I can't talk through this now. To see if the town will vote to authorize the treasurer with the approval of the select board to borrow the sum of $610,000 for the purpose of funding the design and construction of the Spectacle Pond Water Treatment Plant improvements for the removal of PFAS, including demolition and site preparation costs and costs incidental or related thereto. Any premium received by the town upon the sale of any bonds or notes approved by this vote, less any such premium applied to the payment of the cost of the issuance of the bonds or notes, may be applied to the payment of the costs approved by this vote in accordance with Chapter 44, Section 20 of the General Laws, thereby reducing the amount authorized to be borrowed to pay such costs by a like amount or take any action related thereto. Sponsor of the Board of Select Board, FinCom, to report at town meeting.
Mr. Moderator, I move that the town vote to authorize the treasurer with the approval of the select board to borrow the sum of $610,000 for the purpose of funding the design and construction of the Spectacle Pond Water Treatment Plant improvements for the removal of PFAS.
Seconded.
The article has been moved and seconded. I believe we have a presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Next slide, please. Just to give you a little background, so Massachusetts is one of the first states in the country to come up with a maximum contaminant level for PFAS in drinking water. The EPA set a health advisory limit of 70 parts per trillion for 2 of the PFAS compounds, and there's thousands of these compounds, and they've basically been outlawed from most manufacturing in the United States, but Teflon frying pans have PFAS in them, some of the clothing, but the primary source of contamination was from either firefighting foam or some of the industrial coating units. We tested for the PFAS in our wells in 2016 and discovered that we were over 20 parts in all of our supplies. We knew that the state was going to be coming out with a limit, so the town has been proactive in appropriating money and moving forward with treatment. There's currently over 30 water systems that have tested with PFAS over the 20 parts per trillion. Most of them are just starting the process of figuring out how they're going to treat it and how they're going to pay for it. And based on the new regulation, if we hadn't tested, then we wouldn't have to test for about another year. Next slide, please. So these are the levels that we're finding in our water supply right now. We have taken one well offline, and then we put in temporary treatment. So blending that with the other wells, we're keeping the levels around 20 parts per trillion on the system. You can see on the bottom 2, Washington Street tank and Pingree Hill tank. Those are the levels that are probably at most out in the distribution system when all the supplies get blended. So we're right about the 20 parts per trillion. And that 20 is based on a long-term exposure. We've sent out notices if anyone has specific questions on PFAS and potential health effects. I'm not a toxicologist, but I can give you some background on what's happening in the water and what the potential risks might be. But right now, it's a long-term exposure, 70 years. So having it for a short period of time isn't a significant health issue unless you're one of the sensitive population. Next slide, please. So we have just completed a treatment plant at Grove Pond. It's what we call substantially complete, so it's in operation. It's delivering water with non-detect levels of PFAS, and it was paid for with a grant from the Army for about $4.7 million. Next slide, please. So Spectacle Pond provides about 40% of the town's water supply. We have a treatment plant there that removes the iron and manganese from the wells, and the limits are between 20 and 30 parts per trillion. So town meeting had appropriated money a couple of years ago. We tested different treatment systems and determined that granular activated carbon was the best way to remove the PFAS, which was interesting because when we tested the different techniques at Grove Pond, we determined that ion exchange was actually the optimum treatment method, but that process did not work for the Spec Pond water. We looked at a lot of the different chemistry of the waters and could never really figure out exactly why it didn't work, but it definitely, the ion exchange definitely didn't work. Next slide, please. So, when we first decided to do treatment at Spec Pond, what I figured we could do before we did the testing and realized ion exchange wasn't going to work, was I said, well, building a treatment plant at Grove Pond, let's just take that same footprint, same treatment, plunk it down here. So it's a little different because the site is different. We couldn't do a building addition. We've got a lot of wetland resources. We've got limited land area, limited access. When we determined we had to do the GAC treatment, the vessels are much taller and larger, and so we had to design a totally different building. One of the other issues with Spectacle Pond is it's an older treatment plant. It was built in the mid-80s, so a lot of the electrical systems, the HVAC, the generator needed to be upgraded to tie in a new treatment building. So we also have, as I mentioned, issues with the location of existing wells, wetlands, and there's also a land-use turtle habitat that we have to work around. Next slide, please. This is looking at the existing treatment plant. You can see it's just a big brick box. If you're staring at that on both the right side and the left side, there's wetlands, so we don't have a lot of room out there. Where we're going to put the proposed treatment plant is where those cars are parked. Next slide. This is just a footprint showing how the layout is. You can see it's a pretty tight site, which drives the cost up. Next slide. And there's the floor plan of the building. So you can see we have two GAC granular activated carbon vessels that will remove the contamination. So the water will pump from the wells through the existing treatment plant, back through these vessels, and then back to the distribution system. Next slide. You can see how tall that is. On the left side, there's a little man standing in the restroom, and you can see how much taller the building is. And that's another point of this is whenever you build a new building, you have to make it compliant with all the building codes. And we normally wouldn't have to put a restroom in this, but to make it compliant with building codes, we have to have an ADA compliant restroom, and our existing plant is not ADA compliant. So we have to put one in here and we'll abandon the other one. Next slide. So funding issues. So town meeting has previously authorized $6.2 million. When we bid the project, it came in at $5.15 million. So when we added up everything with the additional costs, including design, construction administration, and contingencies, we were just over the $6.2 million. We do have mass drinking water low interest loan under what they call the state revolving loan fund. So basically, we'll fund the project without having to pay any principal and interest at first, and then they will do some principal forgiveness, and they calculate that based on how many loans they give out. So it's hard to guess what the percentage of that is, but we definitely qualify for that. And then we were recently awarded a $200,000 grant to cover some of the engineering costs. I also, after we bid the job, talked to the contractor and said, are there any ideas of what we can do to save some money? And we've come up with about another $100,000 in savings that we'll incorporate into the project after we sign a contract. We're not allowed to do that before we sign the contract, but there's some items where he said, well, we could do this and not lose any functionality or use some different materials that were specified. Next slide. So the costs to date, you can see we have the design, and then we had, because of the tight site and also some problems we were having with one of the wells, we had to put in a replacement well. So including all the construction costs, and we're required by the state to have a contingency of 5%. So we came out, it's about $7 million. We have, as I said, previous town meeting appropriation of $6.2 million. We've got the $200,000 grant. And so we need about a little over $600,000. So at the time I was putting all the numbers together for town meeting, we rounded that up to 610 because I didn't have all the quite exact numbers, but 610 would give us a little more contingency. Next slide. Nope, that's it. Any questions?
Well, not yet. Before we have any further discussion, I'd like the chairman of the FinCom to give his presentation.
At the September 23rd Finance Committee meeting, which Robert attended and presented this article to us, voted to approve.
Is it? Ms. Nearing. I'm sorry, Director. Did she go first?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Lori Nearing. First, I want to congratulate Mr. Wetzel on all his hard work on all of this. We are in Ayer way ahead of most other towns in Massachusetts because Mark has been on the cutting edge of all of this research, and many towns are kind of envious that we have to have somebody as good as you are. So thank you, and that's a wonderful $200,000 grant that you received for us. My question is, do we know at Spreck Pond who the responsible parties are, what the sources of the PFAS in that area? And if so, or if we find out who they are, can they help us pay for it or refund it much like the Army did?
So we have not determined who the responsible party is. That can be a quite lengthy process. We are working with Mass DEP, Division of Wayside Cleanup. They've started some preliminary testing at 3 different areas up gradient of the well field. We've identified potential sources of pollution, but the contamination, but at this point they haven't got a real smoking gun on which one, but I would anticipate that we will within a year or two, and then at that point we would try to recover the cost from the responsible parties.
Yes, sir. You're up.
Mr. Moderator,
name and address, please.
So this project...
Name and address, please.
Oh, I'm sorry, Richard Ressa, J7 Coolidge Road. Tonight we're looking for an additional $610,000 on a $7 million project for the water treatment to the town of Ayer. My question, we have presently extended our water lines into Devon's. We're going to discuss extending our water lines into... No, this is germane. Allow me to finish. Because I'm not getting to Article 9. I'm just mentioning it as what's coming. We have extended into Devon's, correct? Our water system?
We extended to Devon's primarily as an emergency interconnection. We don't sell water to them and they don't buy water from us. It's purely if we have a problem, we can get water from them, and if they have a problem, we get water from us.
Have we extended to any other communities? Are we extended to any other communities?
Water supply is not extended outside of town, other than a couple services. There's one on Littleton Road to the campground up by Willow Road, and then there's a couple houses on Groton School Road right across the town line.
Was the tie-in to Groton through the moderator, was that a loop tie-in? Similar to Devon's?
The Groton was a sewer connection.
Was a sewer connection. My question is, and I guess it may not be germane at this point, but is, how do we, well, it is, I guess, because we do have several people, how do we assess the people receiving water from the town? This is upon our tax burden, each of us here this evening. How do we assess the people who take water that aren't part of our town?
That is not,
We have people who are receiving our water, the superintendent just told us, who are not within the boundaries of the town of Ayer.
Sir, the article is to authorize additional funding for Spectacle Pond. What goes to other towns, I suspect, will come out later.
We already have water going to these other towns, so the fact that we're already doing, we're asking to borrow an additional $610,000 for a system that's serving people outside our town. How do we assess that? How will they be assessed as part of the $610,000? Does that bring it back to Jermaine?
All I will say is, we talk about the assessment under the other article, but the funding for this article is out of the water, it's what's called the Water Enterprise Fund. It's solely based on the water rates and the user fees, so nothing is from the tax base for funding any of the water operations or water treatment plants or capital costs. And we do have a rate model. I work with we have a rate committee. The town treasurer, or town accountant has a rate model. We plug in all the capital improvements, and we look at what the water rate projections will be under different scenarios. And then we study those and then look at what we can afford to do and what the impacts are on the rates.
I have two questions. If we're using 40% of that water supply, who's using the rest of it?
I'll clarify that. 40%. So we have two well fields, Grove Pond and Spectacle Pond well fields. The Grove Pond has 3 wells that provide about 60% of our water. Spectacle Pond provides about 40% of our water. Because of PFAS contamination, we reduced the use at Grove Pond. So right now they're running about 50-50. Well, we just ramped it up this month. So we are back to about our 60-40 mix on our water. So all of our water stays in town of Ayer with the exception of those 3 or 4 customers.
Is any of the Spectacle Pond in Littleton? Is that isn't that some of that property of theirs?
Our well field?
Yeah.
No, it's all on town of Ayer.
Spectacle is all ours?
We don't own the pond. We own the land abutting the pond, which is where our well field is.
Okay, who owns the pond?
State.
Okay, so it's coming out of an aquifer?
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes. Groundwater.
Any further discussion? Yes, sir.
Dale Levandier, Sandus Point Road in here. This is more a question of curiosity. Has the town considered the ongoing costs of operating the filtration system for the PFAS, the lifetime of the carbon filter system, the cost of replenishing? I assume that's folded in at some point.
Well, that will be will be built into the operating budget.
Okay, all right.
We did for the growth pond treatment plant, since the Army is funding that, they're funding a certain number of changeouts of the media at that location.
Any further discussion? This article does require a two-thirds vote, but we're going to do a voice vote first. All those in favor of passing this article, say aye. Aye. Opposed? That's pretty much two-thirds. Yes. Unanimous. Motion passed, unanimous. Article 6, establishment of the Ayer Affordable Housing Trust. To see if the town will vote to accept the provisions of Mass General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 55C, and to establish a trust to be known as the Ayer Affordable Housing Trust, whose purpose shall be to provide for the creation and preservation of affordable housing in the town of Ayer for the benefit of low and moderate income households. Said trust to be overseen by a board of trustees consisting of 7 members appointed and acting pursuant to and in accordance with the provisions of General Law C-44, Section 55C, or take any action thereon or in relation thereto. Sponsored Board of Selectmen, Ayer Affordable Housing Committee recommends. Simple majority vote required.
Mr. Moderator,
Ms. Livingston.
I move that the town vote to accept the provisions of Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 55C, and to establish a trust to be known as the Ayer Affordable Housing Trust for the purposes of creating and preserving affordable housing in the town of Ayer for the benefit of low and moderate income households.
Second.
Motion been seconded. I believe there's a brief presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'm Janet Pravadegas. I'm chair of the Affordable Housing Committee, and we are coming forward looking for a housing trust. Next slide. When you look at a municipal housing trust, it's to go ahead and make sure that we have monies for an expansion of affordable housing within the community. Next slide. Okay, why are we going to do it now? We want to make sure everybody has a chance to get affordable housing within our town. I mean, we know Ayer is growing. I think I heard it a couple times that it is growing tremendously. So with that, we want to be able to, again, last year, the CPA requested an increase of our surcharge. That surcharge is going to be coming into the town now. With that, we'd like to be able to use that money towards this type of a housing trust so that we are able to go ahead and have more, like I say, available. Also, too, we want to go ahead and with the new zoning bylaw, there's an inclusionary zoning bylaw that has in lieu of payment, so that as developers come in, they're able to go ahead and give us money for this housing trust, so that instead of building specific units. Also, too, now because of the pandemic, we do have funding sources, state and federal, but there are individuals that are falling through the cracks. This would have been great to have before all this happened, but now that it has happened, it's nice to be able to have something that individuals can go ahead and rely on, and also too, if this ever happens again. Also, if you look at the Ayer master plan, we want to try to go ahead and keep Ayer diversified. Next, please. One thing that we can go ahead and do right off the bat, if this housing trust gets created and the next article gets passed, we'd be able to help out low and moderate income households with their rent assistance. It goes to the landlord, it does not go to the person, but it will go to the landlord. Also too, we'd be able to then, as it grows, we can look at building affordable housing units, work with a profit or a non-profit developer. This way here again, we can keep that diversity going within the town. When you start looking at all the different developments that can occur, we can help individuals who already have these types of housing units to be able to keep that deed restriction. You know, just to, like I say, assist to keep people within their houses. Next slide, please. All right, the potential funding sources. Again, like I say, the next article is from a CPA option that we can get funding from CPA. CPA funds have been able to be used before for rental assistance. This here puts it in a separate bucket, sort of like what we did with the conservation fund. So we have additional monies available, but now we have to come to town meeting saying, okay, great, we want to put money in this housing trust. Then these individuals who would be the board of trustees can go ahead and help work on that along with the Office of Community and Economic Development. So with that, this here goes ahead and allows us to be able to assist people with maybe $300, $500 or whatever, you know, for rental assistance, all the way up to working with the developer. The other opportunities are, like I say, the inclusionary housing zoning bylaw. Town of Ayer can fund it. Potential grant opportunities, because we've got some great people on our boards that can go ahead and write some pretty impressive grants, and private contributions. And like I say, this is above and beyond what's available now for state and federal. Next slide, please. So the initial steps is tonight. It's got to get passed. Once it gets passed, the next article, we'll have the $30,000 hopefully to give seed money. A lot of people will ask, well, how come we didn't ask for more? Let's start this first. All right, we'll know how much money this 3% surcharge increase would go ahead and bring. So we'll be back in the spring to look for CPA funds, additional CPA funds. Then we're going to create the bylaws. That's also too going to be reviewed and up for vote at Springtown meeting. We had, you know, again, these slides are probably going through them fast because we did have 2 public information sessions, you know, to get people more involved and get feedback. We're going to continue doing that because we want to be as transparent as possible because, again, these are our tax dollars that we're, you know, the surcharge. So we're going to recommend individuals for the Board of Trustees. They have to be, well, the next slide will show more, and develop the guidelines and application. All right, next slide, please. The 7 board members, they have to be town of resident, you know, the town of Ayer residents. They also, too, we're going to be looking for somebody on the Mass General guidelines. It has to have somebody from the executive branch, somebody from the select board. They also, too, recommend that the board does the appointment. But in our bylaws, we like to go ahead and say with the information, you know, individuals are going to get recommended by the Affordable Housing Committee. Also, too, we want to be able to have somebody from the Affordable Housing Committee as well as the Planning Board. People who have some sort of real estate, banking, you know, that type of information so that they can assist with looking at some of these applications and such. We're going to, like I say, go ahead and make sure that it's only a 2-year term, but they can get reappointed. We're going to stagger it and everything else. All right, next slide, please. We've got support from the Select Board, Planning Board, Finance Committee, Council of Aging, and the Office of Community and Economic Development, and also to the Ayer Housing Authority. Next one. Like I say, this is a new program for Ayer, so we're going to start cautiously. We're going to get feedback from you all. That's what we're here for. And these are the contact information if you want to go ahead and ask any questions. Thank you very much.
Motion's been made, it's been seconded. Do we have any discussion?
Jennifer King, 7 Union Street. Could you just tell me what CPA means, Mr. Moderator, please? And also, I just wanted to understand a little bit more. The funding would be used to, it sounds like to me, directly to help pay for housing in some kind of ways, but also to developers. If you could just kind of just clarify that a little bit. Thank you.
Community Preservation Act, CPA.
Hi, Mr. Moderator, yes.
She asked.
You got it. Yeah, the CPA's Community Preservation Act, and we have a Community Preservation Committee here in town that has 7 individuals. Many of them are seated around you. When you go ahead and look at the funding sources, it goes inside the trust. It's the Board of Trustees, through the bylaws that we'll be reviewing and everything else, will go ahead and have a specific purpose. And that purpose would be to, again, rental assistance. If you're looking at housing, like if we're going to be building something, then that's additional there's going to be additional information sessions that we would have, so that if we're going to be spending, like if we put a loads money, within this, like the Conservation Fund has $500,000 in it, because when you're buying a piece of property, it's not going to cost $1. With that, we'll go ahead and make sure that we have these type of public information sessions to say, okay, great, we've got this land opportunity. If someone wants to come in and build all these houses, affordable, units and such, then we'll be able to say, this is what we're going to be spending it on, so more information is available. Trying to think of, I think that covers, like, say, all the different opportunities for, development. I know that the Office of Community and Economic Development right now works on the CDBG grant. So what they can do is help people stay within their houses as they renovate it. This will be up in addition for those individuals that may fall through the crack as well. So again, it's really going to be, working with that Board of Trustees, and there are going to be volunteer opportunities for individuals when that board is going to be put together. So, okay, any other? Jennifer, was that good? Okay.
Yes, good.
I have a couple questions for you. Currently, we have about 900 houses that are in the queue to be built. We're almost out maximum for build out in this town already. So I think this is ill-advised. Even, it's just my opinion, that once you start a seed money project, it escalates to more money later down the road, and that's what we've seen in several things that they've had that we voted for. And then you're asking for a lot more money down the road. And then you're asking for people to have a position and office and so on. And that's why I'm against both of these. I'm sorry.
Any further discussion?
Can I reply?
Please.
All right. One good thing about this, Liz, is, again, this is still our town money. So if there are additional funds that are going to be requested, more than likely, off the bat, it's going to come from CPA funds. So with that, it has to pass through town meeting. So it's not like it's just going to be funded in the back door, all right? It's all going to be transparent. Now, when things start, like I say, if it's going to go ahead and escalate, right at the beginning right now, we're looking at rental assistance, because there are individuals in this town that fall through the crack. They do not get state, federal. This would have been great to have, and other towns around us are going ahead and are using it to assist. Now, when you're talking about hiring individuals, we already have the Office of Economic and Community Development. They already do that. So which means Alicia will go ahead and be the one who's going to maintain that. She's going to be the administrative. So it's already there. All right. It's all set up. So, go ahead.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Moderator, through you, just for a quick clarification, I think it's important to note that under the Community Preservation Act, there are certain categories of expenditures. One of the categories is specifically community and low-income housing. So there's a requirement that the funds from the CPA, the Community Preservation Act funds, be expended for low-income housing. So to the point of where money might come from, that every year you budget for that, and this would be a mechanism for the use of those funds. So I just wanted to point that out, that this is a specific requirement of the CPA to fund, and I know we're not talking about the next article yet, but just in terms of how the Housing Trust would derive some funding, the CPA funding is a requirement, for low-income housing is actually a requirement of the act.
Ayer, National Street. I just really want to thank everyone who's been involved with developing this proposal. I really think that the Housing Trust has a lot that it can offer the town. I thank Janet, I thank Alicia, who's just been, what they're doing within their department, it's really valuable for the community, and they're really assisting a lot of people. And this just gives us a lot more flexibility to fund such programs. It provides seed money for additional grants that we could apply for, and just gives a lot more flexibility for the town to be able to respond to the housing crisis. We also need to keep in mind that we do have a state requirement for a 10% goal for affordable housing within our community, and we're short of that right now. Anytime that we're short of that, it puts us in a vulnerable position for housing developments that aren't going to go through all of the rigorous review that the town would require under its local bylaws. And so this is sort of a carrot that the state gives developers to develop affordable housing, but it puts the community at a disadvantage whenever we get those proposals and they don't go through the proper and full vetting of our community and throughout the local bylaws. So if we can get the affordable housing level up above that 10%, then we're no longer susceptible to that risk. And it is just a worthy goal to be able to support more diverse economic housing stock. And, I'm just really grateful that everyone's advancing this initiative. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Yes, sir?
Hard to deny. I imagine this may come from...
Your name and address, sir?
Certainly. Connor Boyle from 123 Littleton Road. This may come from a point of lack of knowledge on my own part, but would there be any intersectionality between, say, funding sources, or such as, say, Section 8 housing or choice housing vouchers as a program?
Mr. Moderator? If you wanted to bring up the slide that talks about the funding sources, this is for individuals who do not meet Section 8, who do not need the choice vouchers, all right? Like I say, these are the individuals that don't meet any state or federal guide, they fall through the cracks because they earn $50 too much. Again, we're looking at the median income of low and moderate. So with that, and again, when you start looking at affordable, we are still in Middlesex County, which happens to be still part of the Boston real estate, market. So when you're looking at the affordable, it's still going to be, it's still going to have a price tag on it. So we want to go ahead and make sure that other individuals can have assistance, but it will not be the Section 8, because again, they're already taken care of. All right, thank you.
Any further discussion?
Mr. Moderator, one more thing. There's brochures out there too with more of the information, okay? So make sure you get one, and if you don't, come see me. I've got extra in my purse.
Yes, sir?
I don't need advice. Would this only be for rental assistance, or would it be for mortgage assistance if you're facing foreclosure or something?
Mr. Moderator, it will grow, so it will be able to help out for first time. Oh, you didn't hear the question?
I'm not going to be able to reach that far. Do you mind just coming right over here, sir?
Would it only be targeted towards rental assistance or would it
Name and address,
also?
sir?
Kevin Murphy, 20 William Street. Would it also be able to help people avoid foreclosure or is it just for rental assistance?
Mr. Moderator? At the beginning, it's rental. As you can see from some of the slides and some of the information, it can grow. So which means it would be able to help out first-time homeowners. It would be able to help out just in case there is a foreclosure. Again, these are the guidelines and everything that's going to get generated as it grows. So it will be feedback from the public of how it wants to grow. And with that, again, that's going to be the guidelines. So to answer your question, initially rental, but it can grow to be first-time homeowners and, like I say, foreclosures.
Any further discussion? None being heard. All those in favor of Article 6, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? The ayes have it. The article passed unanimously. Article 7. Ayer Affordable Housing Trust initial funding request. See if the town will vote to transfer from the Community Preservation Fund FY 2021 balance reserve from housing category the sum of $30,000 to the Ayer Affordable Housing Trust, whose purpose shall be to provide for the creation and preservation of affordable housing in the town of Ayer for the benefit of low and moderate income households, or to take any other action thereon or in relation thereto. Sponsored by the Select Board. Ayer Affordable Housing Committee recommends, Community Preservation Committee recommends. Simple vote required.
Mr. Moderator?
Sir.
I move that the town vote to transfer $30,000 from the Community Preservation Fund from fiscal year 2021, balance reserve for the budget reserve category to the Ayer Affordable Housing Trust.
Seconded.
Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? There being none, simple majority vote required. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. That article passed. Article 8. Sandy Pond School Association Phase 2 Structural Restoration Project. To see if the town will vote to transfer from the Community Preservation Fund FY 2021 balance reserve from historical resources category the sum of $187,340 to support the Sandy Pond School Association in its Phase 2 restoration of the National Historic Building located at the corner of Sandy Pond, Willow, and Westford Roads, pursuant to a grant agreement between the Board of Selectmen. Upon such terms and conditions as the board, in consultation with the Community Preservation Committee, shall determine, and the Sandy Pond School Association, limiting the purposes for which such funds may be expended, provided that such agreement shall contain a requirement that the grantee provide the town with historic restoration consistent with the requirements of General Law, Chapter 44B, the Community Preservation Act in said property, and to authorize the Select Board to accept such restrictions or take any action thereon or in relation thereto. Recommended by the Select Board. The Select Board is a sponsor. Community Preservation Committee recommends. Historical Commission recommends. Simple majority vote required.
Mr. Moderator?
Mr. Hood.
I move that the town vote to transfer the sum of $187,340 from the Community Preservation Fund FY 2021 balance reserve from the budget reserve category to support the Sandy Pond School Association Phase 2 restoration of the Sandy Pond Schoolhouse through an agreement as contained in Article 8 and read by the moderator.
Seconded.
Article been made and seconded. I believe there's a brief presentation.
Mr. Moderator? Sir. Nathan Kell, 91 East Main Street. I think there's a typo. Where are you? Mr. Moderator, Nathan Kell, 91 East Main Street. I believe there's a typo. It says restriction consistent, not restoration.
Yeah, it's kind of typos.
Third line to the bottom.
Mr. Moderator, there's no typo. It's a historic restriction consistent with the requirements of Chapter 44 B of the Community Preservation Act. Historic restriction.
Hello, everyone. I'm Irv Rockwood with the Sandy Pond School Association. Here tonight to speak to you about this proposal. This, I would hasten to add, is the final proposal for completing a project that essentially, a project and a process that essentially began 6 years ago in 2014, when our association sat down and said to ourselves, what are we going to do about the school? We know that it has deteriorated over the years. We know that there are things we would like to do with it, but we aren't exactly sure how to do all of them, what the proper route is, and we needed to get some advice and establish some goals. What we basically wanted to do was to make sure that the building could be restored, reopened to the public on a continuing basis, and it could also be used, as it will be used, as a venue for a variety of public and community events. So what did we do? The first thing we did was bring on a consultant, and with the aid of the consultant, we got it on the National Register of Historic Sites, and that was accomplished in 2017. The next thing we set out to do was to figure out how to fix it. We knew it needed fixing. We knew a variety of problems existed, but we weren't historical preservationists or architects, and so we went out and got a conditions assessment, brought in a team of an architect, contractor, and several other people who gave us a plan for restoring the building. We then actually began the restoration work with funds from the Community Preservation Committee. We broke it into 2 phases. Phase 1, which is the one described here, was the short-term stuff that had to be done to make sure that this building would survive, that it could be stable, that it wasn't going to fall down on us, and would be here, say, 150 years from now, having already lasted for 150. The main work that was done during that phase, which was funded with CPC money, was pretty basic. Foundation repair and stabilization, masonry repair of the classroom ceiling, and a variety of other things. That work has almost all been completed at this point. We have 2 things left on the table, and those are in process. We're getting quotes. When we finish that work, we will have essentially gotten the building into condition that we can finish the work. So next slide, please. I want to quickly review what we did. One of the things that we did was, very basic, was to fix the foundation. This was a sort of invisible problem. If you drove by the school, you wouldn't have noticed it. But it was a problem that was really quite serious, and as a result of the foundation on the right front of the building slowly sliding off of the footings beneath. That had to be done before anything else. That was step 1. And if you drive by the building today, you probably still won't notice the difference unless you see the little gravel drainage around the outside of the building. But the point is, the building is now stable, it's not going to fall down. Once that was done, we were able to move on after the foundation, next slide please, to the masonry work. The building is a masonry building with bricks. It's one reason it's here today in comparison with its predecessors, all of which were wood, which either burned or fell down.
after about 30 or 40 years. This one is 150 years old, and the masonry certainly columns. This is just a sample of the damages. Actually, it's a rather more severe one, but there was considerable damage to the mortar, and that was partly the result of the foundation work slowly sliding away. Today, the masonry has all been, the damaged materials and surfaces have all been replaced. The mortar has been replaced with matching mortar, and we have a new plaque on the building showing that it's on the National Register. Next slide, please. The other major problem, which everyone noticed when they came in the building, was the ceiling. Excuse me, I'm not good with this math. The ceiling, by the time we began this work, was sagging about 5 inches. In order to repair it, it was necessary to remove the old building, the old ceiling. We took that out, put in new structural supports, and now the entire ceiling is level. It's been replaced with a new modern type of wallboard, blue board, with a plaster finish on it, so that it very closely resembles the original surface. And the good news is it's the same height all the way across. Next slide. The result is that with that work done and painting on the interior of the classroom has been largely completed. And people who came by this last September to see the open house celebrating the building's 150th anniversary had an opportunity for the first time to see what the classroom looked like in its restored condition. Next slide. That was the 150th. I don't know if any of you came. We had over 100 people there. We had music. We had a very large birthday cake. We had activities for children. We had a couple of lectures. We had representatives from the state legislature, and a very nice time, except for the fact that it rained in the afternoon. Next slide. A couple of other things that have been done very recently. One is that we replaced the shutters. We had originally planned just to paint them. Further investigation demonstrated that was a bad idea. And so we have replaced them and we changed the color. The color change was because of historical concerns and considerations. The architect who was advising us on the project went back through all the old black and white photos we had of the school and pointed out that those shutters were not white. And nor were they black. There was something in between, and after a certain amount of research, we settled on a color called Essex Green, which is from the Benjamin Moore historical palette. So that's why if you drive by the school today, it has green shutters. Next slide. This one is almost self-explanatory. The old electrical system is on the left. The new one is better. Next slide. So, where are we now? We want to wrap it up. We want to finish the building. We want to be able to open it to the public on a continuing basis. We have a variety of programs we have in mind. One is an elementary school visitation program, where elementary school students will be able to come and spend a day in a 19th century school. The other is, we would like to be able to use this space as they did for many years, from the time that the association bought the school in 1908. For many years, they had a variety of public events were held here, concerts. There was at least one art auction. We used to have lectures, reunions, and the like. That activity all fell off over time as the original founders of the association left us, and also as the building quality deteriorated. It's a really nice little venue. We had an unexpected event there in late February that we hadn't anticipated, especially in late February. A family that had lived here in Ayer, a military family, had lived here in Ayer for about 4 years. The wife, they had just moved away. The wife had just been promoted to major in the Air Force. And there's a little promotion ceremony you have in the military for that sort of thing. She had to pick a place to have it. She wanted to have it at the Sandy Pond Schoolhouse on February 28th, 2020. And we did. We had about 40 people there. It was a little chilly, but it worked out really well, and it was a nice example of the kind of thing that could be done spontaneously when the space was available. So
What are we going to do now? How are we going to finish? What needs to be done? Well, two of the bigger projects, the first two ones, is making a fully accessible washroom, making the entrance fully accessible. Another thing that will happen inside the school, the building, is at the entranceway between the L, which is to the right of the classroom, and the entrance into the classroom, that will need to be modified and expanded. Those are fairly large projects, and they really have to be done if we're going to have school children in the building and enable it to be open to the entire public. Above and beyond that, the other big thing is the windows and the installation of some sort of a heating system. We'll talk about that in a minute. And then either roofing or insulation, but it will probably be roofing. So those are the main projects, and we'll take a quick look at a couple of them now in a minute here. Next slide. We have a washroom. It's dates from the 1920s, roughly. It's not what you would call fully accessible, and at the moment it doesn't have any hot water. This will require a fairly major redesign, but we will preserve and save the materials that are there, even though the washroom will necessarily be, the layout will be modified considerably, and then we will finish it off using the existing materials, and we'll have a finally fully accessible washroom. Next. We also need to do something about the entrance accessibility, and the entrance that we modified is the one on the L, because that's the one where everybody goes in now, and because it'll be a lot easier to do that. Next. The windows. The windows are original. There are about a dozen of them. And they're actually not in bad shape considering that they're 150 years old. However, they do need to be restored. And that's a kind of, not a complex process, but it's very tedious and time consuming. It involves removing each of the windows one at a time, stripping them, and then repainting them after you have reglazed and put the glass back in. These are large windows, and there's, I believe, 6x6s. And we happen to have, happily, somebody bought a large pile of window panes that are sitting in a closet in the L, so we don't think we'll have to buy too much glass, but we will need to do a lot of work to fix the windows. Next. Heating. The building currently doesn't have heating. It did. It was a schoolhouse. School met in the winter. They needed heat, and they used what for the time was a very modern heating system, very large stove. It's still there, and it will remain there. But it doesn't seem a good idea to take a 150-year-old wooden building that's wooden frame and to reuse the wood heat. I burned wood for about 30 years. I didn't want to burn wood in this stove in this schoolhouse. So we will probably be installing an electrical heating system, what they call mini split heat pumps. And if we do that, there will probably be two visible units inside, one in the classroom and one in the L, but we don't have the design for that yet. Next. And that's the goal. The goal is reopening the schoolhouse. Ayer's iconic Little Red Schoolhouse open to all, and with a little bit of luck, we hope that we would finish that project by the end of 2021, assuming there's not another delay such as the one we experienced in the first half of this year. That's the proposal. We're nearing the end of a 6-year program, and with a little bit of luck, the result, if this request is approved, will be the reopening to the public and the use of this schoolhouse for public meetings, public events, and for school children, and as a historic site for another 150 years. Thank you. Motion's been made and seconded. Do we have any discussion?
I have a question about the glass. Are you replacing it with historical restoration glass, or are they going to be flat plate glass, modern flat? Yeah. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Historic glass or modern glass? Sorry? Historic glass or modern?
Oh, okay.
Well, at the moment, there are only about half a dozen panes of glass currently in the schoolhouse that probably require replacement. Very little. We do happen to have a supply of glass that was acquired some years ago that's available in the building. We haven't really looked to see if that's completely historically appropriate glass. I'm not expert enough to be absolutely sure about that. If it's not, and we can obtain what we need, then we will do that.
Further discussion? It only requires a simple majority vote, so all those in favor of Article 8, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? No. The ayes have it. Article's passed. Article 9, extension of water and sewer line on Harvard Road into the town of Harvard. To see if the town will vote to authorize the extension of the town's water and sewer lines on Harvard Road from approximately the town line on Harvard Road for water and from approximately the end of Markham Circle for sewage, down Harvard Road into the town of Harvard at approximately 320 Ayer Road in Harvard to provide water and sewer for a private residential development in Harvard, to include an assisted living component or take any action thereon or in relation thereto. Sponsor is the select board. Simple majority is required.
Mr. Moderator,
Ms. Livingston.
I move that the town vote to authorize the extension of the town's water and sewer lines on Harvard Road from approximately the town line on Harvard Road for water and from approximately the end of Markham Circle for sewer, down Harvard Road into the town of Harvard at approximately 320 Ayer Road in Harvard to provide water and sewer for a private residential development in Harvard to include an assisted living component as contained in Article 9 and read by the moderator.
Seconded.
Article's been, motion's been made and seconded. I believe it's a presentation by Superintendent Wetzel.
First, I'll give the disclaimer, I am just the messenger. So, in August, I received a call from a developer, Germano DiMombro from Watt Tower Properties, who is proposing I believe it's an over 55, it's a housing project across from the Appleworks building on Ayer Road, and he asked if he could get water and sewer service from the town of Ayer, and I said, well, there's a whole bunch of steps you're going to have to follow, but the first step before we can do anything is you need town meeting approval. We have a bylaw that requires any service, water and sewer service outside of town requires town meeting approval. I did give him some preliminary costs. He'd be responsible for all the infrastructure costs to extend the water and sewer, as well as paying connection fees and inspection fees and meeting all of our town requirements. I also talked to the town of Harvard, and they haven't really gone very far with this project. I think there was a concept presented to the planning board, and that's about as far as that's gone. Can you go to the slide? So it's about 45 units is what was initially planned, and he said it could expand up to 80 units. Didn't give me a lot of details other than I asked for the total number of bedrooms so I could figure out what the water and sewer demands would be. Next slide, please. So this is his concept. You can see the Appleworks building on Ayer Road on the left side, and he's just a bunch of units in there. Next slide, please. So a few weeks ago, I gave the selectmen an update on our water and sewer capacity for a couple of reasons. I'm in the process of updating the water and sewer master plans for the town, looking at what our long-term needs are going to be. Right now, we have an agreement with Devon's that we can
send them up to 800,000 gallons a day of wastewater. That agreement is coming to an end in December 2021, so we're going to have to start renegotiating an agreement because we do need some capacity with our connection to Devon's, but we don't really need 800,000 gallons a day. So we're looking at that number, as well as making sure we have enough water for future developments in Ayer. So based on my capacity analysis, we have a water supply capacity that is adequate through 2035, looking at all the potential developments, including this one. And wastewater with all the potential developments will need approximately 450,000 gallons a day in our new Devon's agreement. Next slide. And this is these are the projects that we looked at. A lot of these are projects that are in the approval stage with the planning board or are on the planning board radar. You can see down at the bottom we have our intermunicipal agreement with Groton, which is up to 40,000 gallons a day. That was approved by town meeting, and then the town manager and I met with Groton a number of times to come up with the basis of the intermunicipal agreement. And financially for the town of Ayer, it was a very good agreement. They pay us connection fees. They paid us $300,000 for infiltration removal in the system, and then we have a minimum charge. So I think their first bill, we charged them $7,000 for their water, for their sewer use, and I think that they charged their customers about $500. So it's a pretty good deal for us. We're not treating a lot of their waste because none of their development has gotten to the point where they need 40,000 gallons a day, but they pay us. And we would do it, if this project went through, we'd do a similar agreement on how it gets paid and what all the conditions are. Next slide. This was what I put together for the selectmen on our capacity. You can see the red line at the top is our maximum supply capacity. That's how much we can pump through from our wells through our water treatment plants. And we base our capacity on what we call the maximum day demand. So we have during the year, we look at how much water we pumped and supplied over the year, and that's divide that by 365. That's our average day demand. And right now that's about 1.4 million gallons a day. Our maximum day is the day that you guys, well, next summer when you get to use your lawn sprinklers, when everybody's out sprinkling their lawns, washing their cars, those hot days in the summer. And that's about 2 to 2.5 times what we normally pump. And so that's the red lines. We need to have enough pumping capacity to be able to meet that demand. And then you can also see on a dark line right down the middle, that's our withdrawal permit. So the state allows us to withdraw a certain amount of water out of our wells on an average basis, and you can see the blue line is well below that. So the water capacity is in pretty good shape up to 2035. We do have another well supply location near Spectacle Pond that we're in the process of evaluating, and that looks like it would be good for about a little under 1 million gallons a day of additional water. Next slide. So the wastewater is similar. We have a capacity at our treatment plant of 1.8 million gallons a day, but the state really wants us to have extra capacity, so they look at can you meet your demand with 80% of your design capacity, and you can see we're over that right now, over the 80%, and that's why we send wastewater to Devon's, and so we'll be renegotiating that. And the upper line doesn't really affect anything. We have extra capacity in our wastewater plant so that we can treat more. But we are also in the process of removing what we call inflow infiltration. So when it rains or when the groundwater is high, we get additional flow that goes through our leaky pipes. And town meeting the last 2 years has approved money to start removing that. So that should bring that upper line down. And so the next steps, if this passes town meeting, then The town manager and the board of selectmen will negotiate a legal agreement that spells out what the fees are, who's responsible for what costs, who's responsible for operation and maintenance. And the potential fees, if we just used our current fee structure, it would be about $625,000 is what they would pay for what we call connection fees for the town. And, but they would, all the agreements would have to be approved by the select board as the water and sewer commissioners for the town.
That it?
That's it.
Yes, ma'am.
Laurie Sable, 1 Winthrop Avenue. Why doesn't Harvard want to supply water? You mentioned something about the planning board in Harvard had been consulted, but
Harvard has a very small municipal water system that just serves the center of town, and they have no, and I think their sewer system is probably for the school and maybe some municipal buildings, so they don't have a system like we do townwide. Most of the town has private wells and on-site septic systems.
thanks for that clarification. So does this create some kind of precedent that might come back to haunt us, bite us in the butt, whatever, in the future?
No, again, we have some sort of a legal agreement, whether that's with the developer, I think that's something town council would have to help us with, but whether the agreements with the town of Harvard or with the town of, or with the developer itself, that would stipulate exactly the specific requirements of what they can do with that. Can they expand it from that system? How much would it cost, and what the approval processes would be. But any other extension would require another town meeting vote.
Mr. Scotts?
Rick Scotch, West Markham Circle. What I'm wondering is, it's a long ways down there where they're going to build these 40 apartments, and there's a lot of houses. I believe there's another condo complex wanting to go where the old gas station was across the street from the new one. Are you going to say, no, you can't tie in, or are you going to say, yes, tie in as we're going by?
That's to be determined. At this point, all we're doing is voting on this specific extension to this specific project. One of the things that I would point out is, you know, as a municipal water and wastewater professional, a lot of the private wells along that area, I know the Appleworks well is contaminated with the PFAS. So there may be an opportunity if this project went through to help alleviate the contaminated water issues with some of the existing properties there.
Mr. Bedard?
Okay, well, my first thing is the same thing I had in the other article, which is, I believe this discussion in its entirety should have been held by the board of selectmen, the town manager, not at town meeting, because there are so many issues and there's been a lot of discussion in social media and that. But I was in contact today and talked to the town planner from Harvard. I talked to the DPW department at Harvard. The town planner at Harvard says there is nothing before that. He says they get requests, 10, 15 requests over the last year, ideas, developments along that stretch of road, but there is nothing before the town of Harvard at this point. There's no preliminaries, there's nothing. The DPW, some of the, I think still part of the bottom talks about the developer will maintain the infrastructure, but that is only their infrastructure within that development. The DPW department, very small that it is in Harvard, has no plans, no intention, has never been discussed ever doing any of the street maintenance. It's a half a mile from our border to this project. They have no intention, have never talked about even doing maintenance on that. And I'm sure Ayer, DPW, is not going to be allowed to go and do Harvard work on the Harvard roads. That's a big thing. There's a lot of other development in that area, and that's not what's before us today, but there are a lot of houses, a lot of things going on. The key to this thing is this, the governor, the state, the town of Harvard is not asking us anything. We have some random developer that came to our town and said, hey, we want to use your water and sewer. And we're going through this whole process at a town meeting, not a presentation by the Board of Selectmen in a public forum where all these questions can get answered. I mean, I've seen for the last 2 weeks, a lot of social discussion going on, and people are upset. But if we had a public forum where all this stuff could happen, this meeting, like the other article, this meeting would have been over like an hour and a half, ago, because this should not be happening at town meeting. And we should also not be accepting and charging, taking time and money and effort of our town government because some random developer comes and asks us a question. If he wants to do it, let Harvard come to us. And that's the meeting for that.
Mr. Moderator.
Sir.
Mr. Moderator.
Mr. Sullivan, go ahead.
Mr. Moderator. Over here.
Where?
I would just like to answer a couple of points, Mrs. Paderkas. One, this was discussed at a board meeting, at an open meeting, and it was an agenda item, and I do believe you participated in that meeting. Two, the town bylaw does require this to go to town meeting, so this is the appropriate forum for that discussion. And third, you do bring up that there's a lot of conversation on social media. However, the town employees and the select board is available by email or by phone to discuss these issues. So if you have them, please bring them to the proper places. Thank you.
Mr. Sullivan.
Tony Sullivan, 79 East Main Street. I was actually quite surprised to see this article back on the warrant because it had been on a prior warrant before town meeting and had been voted down. Our water supply and air is probably our most precious resource. And we need to protect it for the people of Ayer. So I would not be in favor of this article. We've seen with PFAS, I know that our DPW superintendent was doing the best he could to balance water coming from each of our 2 wells to minimize the amount of contaminant that was in our drinking water supply. We're sharing water supply with Harvard for this project. You don't have as much latitude to do that if something should come up with a different contaminant in the future. I just would ask town meeting to vote no on this warrant.
John Overcash, Washington Street. I just wanted to add to everything that's been said that I just think this is a slippery slope. We have our own water supply. If somebody wants to build something in Harvard, let them go to the town of Harvard and try to figure it out, not come to us first. Obviously, from what Mr. Paderkas just said, the town of Harvard has no plan yet before them or anything for this development. So this person coming to us is highly premature in my view at this point, and I think it's just a no-win situation for us. And I personally will be voting no when we get up to that point. Thank you.
Ken Biskin, 180 Washington Street. I'd like to take issue with Mr. Copeland's statement about it needs to come to town meeting for the discussion. I believe it needs to come to town meeting for the approval. All this discussion could have been held ahead of time, and the developer, the developer's not here tonight representing himself because there's no way this town meeting could vote for this article in any situation. But at least if the developer had the nerve to come to town meeting and present it, you could have seen the person and what they're talking about and maybe decided if it was valid to bring it to the town meeting. But I do have a major problem with the process. I think the process should have been vetted through a number of boards, needed Board of Health, the Planning Board, other boards in town that have input to the resources in town and how we use our resources. Then that recommendation from those subcommittees of boards and advisory committees, whatever you might want to call them, to bring that recommendation to the Board of Selectmen. At that point, the Board of Selectmen could have a vote. And instead of just, taking a representation from the DPW director at the request of the developer from out of the town. So I do have, often do not agree with Mr. Paderkas. There's clearly a lack of coordination here. And there's no chance of an article like this being passed for water extension of the town of Harvard for many, many reasons, not the least of which is we want to protect our own resources for the future, as many other people have said. And the fact that we've just voted for our own PFAS improvements in town and a number of town meetings to the tune of about $7 million. I think we want to continue those resources for the future. And I would say make the same discussion on the sewer side as on the water side, but more importantly on the water side. So I feel this article shouldn't be here tonight, should have been vetted earlier, and definitely go no.
Billy Auger, 46 Nango Road. As a fairly new homeowner, I've watched my lawn completely deteriorate, bringing down the value of my house. I know that the town is able to enforce the water ban in Ayer every year. Now, is there going to be a jurisdictional issue when we run our water into another town and this big development is running water constantly from all these units? Who's going to enforce the water restrictions?
Again, that would be something that would be negotiated in agreement as to what the requirements are for our rules and regulations. Basically, they have to follow our rules and regulations is how we set up our other intermunicipal agreement with Groton.
Mr. Fay.
Mr. Moderator, I want to recall something in the early 2000s, I believe, was when we had a similar situation come out of the town of Groton. And I believe it was in the, I want to say the Culver Road area, which is just over the Ayer-Groton line. And this issue would be better presented if there were the pros and cons of why we did not approve it then, as to why we should approve it now, notwithstanding all the earlier points made, where the planning board wasn't involved. That surprises me completely. And looking at, say for example, the town of Littleton, where years ago they had a developer come in and roll off the Littleton Center and start a big development and then walk away and left it with a big patch of nothing. Now, I'm not saying that would happen in Harlem, but if we go through all this gyration of intermunicipal agreements, which I'm not sure, and I'll defer to legal on whether or not that really holds the full enforcement of the law or the full weight of the law, in that one party can opt out whenever they want without consent of the other party. That's another issue that troubles me. So again, I also join those who would say, not at this time, we don't have enough information for all the reasons stated.
Any further discussion? Yes, sir.
My name is Kenny. I live at 7 Pine Street. I'll say this way, I just relocated to 7 Pine Street, back to Ayer. And I know, and there's, I don't know, about 7 folks selected here. I know that the goal in this town is water. And when I hear facts like, if true, that the contractor, and there's no evidence the contractor talking to Harvard, why are we joking into it? Absolutely. We're very cautious about that. And I won't get them straight. My experience with Harvard in the past, when I think about the golf course and many other factors, where we try to deal with Harvard justifiably. So I'm opposed to this. I'm opposed to it. I'm opposed to it because of future residents of this town. They may be regretted if they voted up. But
Move the question.
Question's been moved. Simple majority required. All those in favor of Article 9 say aye. Just move. I would. All those in favor of moving the question say aye. Aye. Opposed? Now. All those in favor of Article 9 signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. Majority says no. No is not passed. Hold, please. Hold. Before we make a motion to close the meeting, when everybody leaves, please go from the back toward the front. Everybody go out, like in line. Please. Motion to adjourn? Good evening.